And we've been doing this a long time. This is our 13th COFES. We're finally getting the swing of things. We've got most of the really bad stuff out. But one of the things that we started out was to try to, this thing is called the Congress on the Future of Engineering Software. It's not, it's not the conference. And the whole idea of a Congress is to get the industry together and to have a conversation and to discuss what's important to the industry as a whole. And what we try to do is we try to put together a very good selection of the core design and engineering software firms, related software and engineering firms, users, academics, analysts, press, and to get all the opinions and ideas into the single bucket to have the conversation. And so this is our opportunity to work together as a group, and we're going to discuss two topics. One, let's see if this works, is the intersection of design and risk, which is the theme for COFES this year. And the other we'll get to when we get to. So I'd like to introduce Monica Schnitker. Can I have a round of applause for Monica
Thank you.
for agreeing to step in the pit with me to lead this conversation. And do I have my mic runners here? You got 1, 2 mic runners? Monica?
Well, what we're going to try to do is get as many of you as possible involved in the conversation. So our first topic for this session is the intersection of design and risk. And you heard Richard this morning, I hope all of you were here, talk very eloquently about how he and Ford looked at all of the variables that were involved in making decisions and assessing risk. And in some cases, trying to figure out the financial benefit of taking one course of action or another course of action. So one thing that didn't happen during that session was a lot of discussion in reaction to what Richard said. So we're going to try to do some of that right now. And I know Brad, a man of very few opinions and even fewer words, has a definite opinion. So we're going to start with you.
So,
but the rest of you be thinking about your opinion because mics are going to be walking around. Sorry.
And we have no problem calling on you if we don't get hands raised. So, Richard and I listened to Richard's presentation several times over the last couple of months, and it's been fascinating to me and how he's taken the concept of understanding risk in terms of what to do and what to decide on a day-to-day basis in engineering and analysis. And it's not from the normal aspect. At the other end of the spectrum is what we were talking about in the DAS symposium on Thursday morning, and the bigger picture risk and the risk of long-term trends that are bearing down on us, one of which obviously is the energy dilemma. Where are we going to be getting our energy from going forward as certain resources become more and more constrained? And so the big difference between what we were talking about on Thursday at the DAS symposium and what Richard was talking about this morning is the time horizon and vision. And Richard's talking about day-to-day decisions right now, right here, that we can act on. And at the same time, we need to keep in mind the time horizon, the long-term vision of the risks that we impose on not only us later, but on future generations and their future generations. So we need to have to deal with that entire spectrum of risk. Now, does anyone want to jump in here? And if not, I will call names. Richard?
I mean, there are also other perspectives on design, on the intersection, right? I mean, there's the perspective Richard had, which was very focused. There's Brad's, which is sort of the greater good for the world, but there's got to be something in between, too. Oh, come on. There we go.
Okay, I'll give another, this is Terry Woolers, Woolers Associates, another perspective on risk, and that is today it's so incredibly easy to copy a design, and so that to me is quite risky. If you invest days, weeks, months in a new design, say a nice enclosure, and then a week later you see it in this part of the world or some other part of the world, and someone else is selling it. How do you reduce that risk? What do you do to counter that?
So is that really a risk or a business reality?
Well, it's both, right? I mean, it's something that you have to take into account when you design the system you use to design things, right? And it's also a risk that even somebody who's an employee could steal a design and take it somewhere. So it is a business risk as much as anything else.
If we're doing something that we think is proprietary and it's easy to copy, then we're taking that risk when we go to design it. There needs to be something else behind it to protect us. Either it's the law or it's some other difficulty that, I mean, it's another consideration.
Terry, how do you deal with that risk?
Well, I guess my point is that the problem's been around for a long time, and there's IP laws in place, but more now than ever, just in recent years, and even in recent months, where you can take a Microsoft Connect device and capture the images and process it with Geomagic software and print it with a low-cost 3D printer. It's just so incredibly easy to do that now compared to the way it was before. So it just the problem will magnify, and maybe it's an opportunity for the legal profession to really tap into this. But it seems to me like it's something that we should be aware of and try to deal with as a design community.
Mm-hmm. It's a very good point. Are there other? There were some other hands up over here. Hang on just a sec. Over here.
Okay.
Oh, I'm
Brian
sorry. I'm
Seitz,
sorry.
Scion Research. If we believe that the idea of incorporating the thought process behind risk here is worthwhile, the question I have, it's more of a social thing, is how do we enable that into our day-to-day practices, both long-term and short-term thinking?
Well, I think that Richard's taken a good stab at this at Ford in terms of integrating the technical side. I'd like to hear the comment again from Richard about the social side that you started to talk about at the end of the conversation.
No, I really did all the talking, but as for the social side of those issues, I did not give today, because of the timing, maybe the right example, so it didn't come so clear. We address more the technical issue, which is the design verification, the actual technical issue. But at the moment you are trying to make a decision what attributes to renew in a vehicle, what attributes are getting more attention, you are getting very, very quick with focus group and customer requirement and directly interacting with customer, you very quickly are getting really to the complexity also of the issue of really the social issue. You are getting to social issue if you are really, one of your major constraints is what DAS is trying to do, the environmental side, which is also part of the equation. But so this is from the point of view of immediate and today and now. The comment I would like to make, we need to differentiate really as every program manager is doing, and I am too much of program manager from this perspective. We need to differentiate between risk, which is now, here, and real, and preventing you really to go forward, and you need to provide mitigation and solution to those risks. Otherwise, you are not really solving your problem. And issues. And really, issues are those which are more far ahead of us, and we will need to confront them. It's not that we don't need to confront them, but we need to confront them in different way. So really, those kind of, and in between those are really there is a whole spectrum, but we need to divide it the right way, otherwise we will get really to a confused situation where we are dealing with, I always am trying to tell to my people that we are always doing what's urgent as opposed to what is important. And I warn us not to go into this trap.
So what do you see as the difference? What is the time horizon for the risk and the time horizon for the problem that is coming? Do you have a time, like is one a year and the other one 10 years?
It's not only the timing issue, it's also the magnitude of the, of the issues, really. We are dealing with different things.
There was one right back here. Oh,
Martin?
sorry, one there first.
Martin Fischer from Stanford. I guess from a AEC industry perspective, and maybe that's different in the manufacturing side, I found that when we bring up the term risk, we bring up basically mostly the history and not the future. Because I would argue that the risks that have existed in the past have very little to do with the risks that we actually face in the future and our ability to handle them in the future. And I just hope that we are not clouded by the past risk management approaches, which are, I can't get excited about those as a professional. Because as a professional, my goal is to create a great design. And I want to start there and put the right team and the tools together. And what I can do, all the things I've seen at COFES this year allow me to do such a dramatically better, different job that will obliterate, seriously, totally just make it a thing of the past, how we have thought about and managed risk. Okay. At least that's my experience of working on large projects in the AEC sector with organizations that have embraced a little bit of what we saw at COFES that's possible.
So we're going to go to John Cummings and then Steve Bodner. John?
John Cummings from the Center for Understanding Change. I think I would like to expand the horizon a little bit and go beyond design and risk to things like policy and risk, governance and risk. I think the really large issues of our time, the issues that we face in the future are very large. They're social issues combined with technical aspects and so forth. It has to do with resources. It has to do with interdependencies. It's the economy, it's energy, it's water, it's food, it's the nexus of all those things. And I think, but I think the message is the same, and that is analysis and simulation are extremely important tools to help us make better decisions. And I think decision analysis in particular, we ought to be guided even in those areas of policy that are so difficult, where we've got stakeholders who are red or blue, or pro or con or whatever, on some really important social issues and governance issues. Ought to be using simulation as a tool to try to understand the what ifs and what the future might look like and what opportunities exist out there.
Steve?
Okay, so I do have a lot of opinions about the technology that we can apply, especially in the areas of simulation, things like that. But what struck me is when Terry was speaking about, sort of addressing Brad and talking about additive manufacturing, 3D printing. It's going to change everything. We both know that. David and I were talking about earlier today. And it's true that pretty much already, but certainly this is going to be even more the case in the near future, that people can just start printing their own, products. And they can copy anything they want. And what struck me as you were saying that is I realized that most of us sitting in this room on the manufacturing side sort of look like the music industry did not too long ago. And it's more, to me, it's less about the risk and more about identifying the opportunity, because if we don't, we're going to get left behind. It can be addressed in the same way that the music industry addressed it. And if people think Steve Jobs saved the music industry, there's opportunity just like that in the future. That's right.
In my contrarian role, I would suggest that risk is a misleading term. In the ISO standards and most textbooks, risk has to do with a possible situation, the probability of it occurring, and the ramifications of it occurring. What most people who engage in risk management never do is estimate the risk that they missed a risk. This is in contrast to Goldrat's advice about system integrity, not presuming to think about all the things that could be a risk, but to simply take the system you're envisioning and methodically go through it to find the weak link. And then the ramifications of what would happen if that is encountered. So I really think we should be talking about design versus integrity of what we're designing, which means that we are also validating or double checking our design than talking about risk. And one of the ramifications of that, you see, is we get off in this world of simulation. Jay Forrester has said repeatedly for 37 years, you should use system dynamics to demonstrate you understand the problem, never to justify your design of a solution. And yet now people run around simulating all sorts of hysterical ideas about how to fix things, right?
You bring up a good point, and that relates directly to Lori Parrott's presentation yesterday on robust yet fragile, you don't want to look at the things that you know that are already good. You want to take a step back and look at the overall system, and then look and see where the fragility is and to operate there. Adrian, you had a...
Actually, Mike grabbed the mic on the way back.
No.
Okay.
Hi. Well, Richard, that was a great talk this morning. There was only one problem with it. I felt I was back at college listening to a college professor talking to me. And I'd be right, because it was great. But you have another career now, which is to sell that plan for license count reduction to every user of PLM systems. But joking aside, that I think we're ignoring the fact whenever you design something, there's a risk. And there's lots of risks, and we kind of ignore them because we think everything's going to plan. So we have unintended consequences. In software, we call it a bug, but I don't know what they call it. Oh, it's a feature, yes. And Richard no doubt calls it a warranty risk. But we also have the time, because if we design it right, we'll never get it to market. And, and somebody else will do it because they're better. We have a risk that it will fail. And we have unintended uses. But people, you say, this is for doing this, and somebody goes and uses it for doing that, and then sues you because it didn't do that, and should have done that. And as you're designing it, we think it all goes according to the plan. Well, we run into something we didn't expect, because presumably, most of the time, especially in software, you didn't do it before, so it's unknown. And probably in a lot of cars, it's unknown how it's going to work. Like, the extension cord in a Volt caught fire or something. I'm sure that wasn't thought of, but it sort of killed the program. Was that a Ford car? It wasn't, was it? And you have over-design. We saw the Roman aqueduct that didn't fall down in 2,000 years. Well, they clearly over-designed it, so they could do it like the Millennium Bridge in London that swayed in the breeze, or the one in Minneapolis where it was a bit too thin on the gussets. I mean, so they saved money. They could have built it like the Romans, but it fell down. And so you overrun with the cost because you put too much in it. So the point is, you design anything, there is risk, and we never face up to that. So now I'll give the microphone back.
Could we
Adrian?
please ask people to identify themselves? Because I'm not sure that everybody knows everybody. So,
Yes. Sorry, Adrian George, Old Dominion University. So, because we are speaking here about risk and the concept of design and the implications, I think one thing is for instance, in Chinese, as I've learned, the risk has two characters together, one representing threat, another one opportunity. So that is kind of things which Chinese are writing things. In Japanese, until recently, they didn't have word concept of risk. So now they are playing with the concept of risk. So you see, this is a kind of societal issue. Another thing, because the gentleman just spoke about the risk and all this, so we are working on a nexus between risk and vulnerability. So the things are two dimension. That you said, oh, is a risk that we will design products after product, we protect it maximum, but next day somebody else is coming with a better things, and then that product is vulnerable. So I think we should speak about this nexus between risk and vulnerability in design or whatever. Finally, we are crying now that you see I've designed something and somebody stole my design or my product and so on and so forth. Yes, go to the silk market in Beijing and you will find a lot of Ralph Lauren shirts. Maybe we have Ralph Lauren shirts now made in China, false one, and so on and so forth. But there is also a market for luxury market. It's a luxury market which has their own clients, okay? Nobody who really affords a luxury market will buy a Ralph Lauren from silk market in Beijing, while people who are buying things from silk market, they aspire to the real market of luxury goods. And I think that we should understand a little bit the segments of markets. Something, you know, people, they have fake Rolex. Okay, other people will never buy a fake Rolex. Some people, they don't know what Patek Philippe watch it is, 40,000, 50,000. Other people buy a Patek Philippe $500,000 just for his collection. I'm saying that design and risk and quality and markets, they have to be treated differentiately, so to speak.
Thank you. Ooh, now we're going.
Shamal?
Can you hear me? Well, I have two comments. One was a person, our colleague, who said, how do you mitigate the risk of something being copied in the market? So in that situation, I have a small software company, and we have a very small solution to that risk. We have a copy protection mechanism, and if you violate that mechanism, then the value of pi starts coming from a random number generator. And it says so in our license that it gives. So I think that risk has to be mitigated upfront and then go. The other thing I'm going to, firstly, Richard, that was one of the best keynotes I've ever seen in COFES, and I congratulate you. Going on his point, and it's a very serious point, there are two aspects. He said just now, people solve what is urgent rather than what's important. Try to understand, for a CAD software or an engineering software company, it is easier to sell something which will solve what is urgent rather than to solve what is important. I'll give you an example. My good friend and respected person, John Herstick, he started a company called Design View, and that was solving what is important. That was a risk mitigation tool up front. It did not work. The company did not work. He started SolidWorks. That solved what is important for the guy, what's urgent for the guy rather than what's important, and you know the rest is history. So I believe that this area of risk mitigation of the design, upfront risk mitigation, has not really been addressed by the CAD vendors. And this is not because they don't know how to, because there's not much money in it. If you have, Professor Ullman has a beautiful tool for risk assessment, design risk assessment. Not many people are buying it. So it's a two-way street. The users have to educate themselves that they need to solve what's important at the same time, what's urgent. And vendors, we have to give a little bit more closer attention to building things which will help people to solve what is important at the same time what's urgent. That's what my take is. Thank you.
Matt? Identify yourself.
Yeah, Matthew Lowe from P&H Mining Equipment. I guess my question probably gets at the right at the topic here is the intersection of design and risk. I manage a design team, and we just really crudely say something is a risk and something is not a risk, and the intent there is to focus additional attention on those areas that we identify as risks. We're not identifying the risks very rigorously. I think that that's been a theme here. So are there practical tools to try to quantify the risk, without doing a full-blown DFMEA and all the systems engineering that has to support all that. But are there ways to practically identify and quantify risk, and then some way to focus the design and engineering teams to actually act on it? And I think that's what you were talking about, is something that's visible, that we can know that we're chipping away at minimizing those risks, or at least some confidence that we're addressing those risks, rather than as a project management metric that we've tried to convince ourselves that it's, that because somebody said it's a risk, that it's hopefully going to get taken care of. It just seems there's a huge disconnect. I can't measure it, I can't identify it, and I have no way of being able to tell whether I'm doing anything about it. And I don't know if I'm missing something, but that's the way it feels down in the trenches.
Yeah, and some of the fields there are, in particular, there's some sustainability tools or manufacturability tools that say there's a green light, red light. And wouldn't it be nice if there was a risk tool that gave you a green light, and a red light goes off, you say, okay, now what do we do? Evan?
I'm Carl Bass. And, I'd like to sell you some cloud software. I'm Evan Yaris. And when I look at the intersection of design and risk, I kind of scratch my head because I don't think there is an intersection between them. I think there's a great big intersection between engineering and risk. In the COFES, the Congress on the Future of Engineering Software, we talk about engineering software an awful lot, but the core software in this industry is really design software, computer-aided design. It's not intended for engineering. And where we start being able to deal with risk is when we inject engineering tools into our design software. For example, I'll talk about Carl's products again. He has a new product called Simulation DFM, which is an upfront tool to help people designing plastic parts to figure out when they're going to waste $100,000 on a mold before they do it. So I'm looking at what can we do to actually inject engineering into the process instead of just doing design.
We'll take one more comment, question, or statement, and then Monica will summarize on this topic.
I'm Scott Williams with Avitech Pacific. I actually want to talk a little bit about what Matt said. You talked about quantifying. It's really what I'm working in. And so I look at risk as having two components from a quantified standpoint. One is stochastic uncertainty, and the other is sensitivity to change. And so you may have a real tight bandwidth, but if it's a highly sensitive parameter, a small change can still cause a huge problem. When we showed this actually in a recent experiment where we did a design of experiments, and so, hey, your manufacturing tolerances at plus or minus 3 thou, you say is okay, turned out to be not so good on a composite hull. That's one. So you may think you've got low uncertainty, but if you've got high sensitivity, you could still be screwed. The other part was the uncertainty, and everyone's kind of known that factor safety is related to addressing uncertainty, but there are quantified methods of going, hey, what's the uncertainty in your data? Guess what? That just became a part of calculating your factor safety. And so look for things that are doing that. You can do that yourself. There are tools. Some of the stuff we're trying to work on and building in and doing what Evan was saying is make those part of those design tools, building in those sorts of heuristics. But I kind of wanted to throw that out there so people remember there are, don't give yourself a false sense of security. Something with a high sensitivity can kick you much harder in the shorts than something with a large degree of uncertainty because it may just not matter. You do design experiments in Pareto principle, hey, these 5 things out of 20 matter. I may have a huge uncertainty in item number 8, but it's below the cutoff, so it doesn't matter. Number 1 may be the most important thing I control very tightly, but a small change could have a huge effect. So you want to think about in your design those sorts of things for risk.
Well, we raised an awful lot of really good issues that added to what Richard said this morning. The things that I wrote down is that I don't know how many people we have in here, but maybe 20 people spoke. We had 20 different definitions of risk and of what is an important risk and what is a risk that actually matters to the business as opposed to a risk that everybody feels but can't really do anything about, like copying of intellectual property. That may not be something we can do anything about because, as Steve said, the reality is that people will be doing rapid prototyping of all sorts of things any minute now. And it's just something we have to figure out how to deal with. There's nothing that your enterprise alone can do anything about regarding that, except maybe make some lawyers really, really rich. But so we had many definitions of risk. We don't know how to identify risk. And to Matt's point, maybe what we need to do is identify the 5 things, and to your later point, identify the 5 things out of the all possibility of 20, 50, 100 things that actually will matter. One of the things that was interesting listening to you talk, the problem kept ratcheting itself upward. Right? The level of panic sort of grew as we talked more and more about the risk. And maybe what we need to do is tone it down a little bit and look at the 5 things that we can do something about and that our gut feel tells us are the most important things. Then lastly, we all work in organizations where urgent is the thing that matters the most. And I can't remember who said it, but the point is it's not what's important that gets dealt with, and that should be what gets dealt with. It's the fact that we are all rewarded because we put out a fire, because we made a customer happy when they thought enough to call in and yell at somebody. That's dealing with urgent, not with important. And that's a cultural shift that may actually be harder to get through than we all can deal with here at COFES. So that was a terrific discussion, but I think we want to move on to...
I have one,
go.
One statement. You said something about concentrating on the risks that we can find. So my only comment about that, or my reaction to that, is that's kind of like the guy looking for his keys under the light.
Yeah, that's true.
Because that's
tell the joke.
The only place he... But I can't tell. You tell the joke.
Oh, I'm horrible at telling jokes. Okay, the story, and I hope you laugh at the end, but I'm not a joke teller. The story is that a guy loses his keys. Okay, it's dark out, he can't find the keys, and so somebody comes up and goes, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Well, I'm looking for my keys." And the person who comes up goes, "But your car's over there. Why are you looking over here?" "Because it's light here and I can see." Okay, the deal is he probably dropped them a lot closer to the car in the dark, but can't see, so he doesn't look there. Oh, thank you. I have no career in comedy coming, I know that. So our second topic.
So.
One more.
In 1996, we thought we knew what the internet meant to our businesses. We were very much on track. We knew it was a really big thing. We knew it was going to change things. And we were a bit naive. Today, many of us have a really good idea of what the cloud is going to do to our business, going to mean to our business. Are we right? My feeling is that we are today very much in a similar position with the cloud that we were in 1996 with the internet. We know it's big. We know it's coming. We know we need to do something about it. It is going to change things, but we're not really sure how. And we are pretty sure it's going to change things in ways that we don't understand. Now, first of all, not all of us believe that. Where's Dave? Burdick. Dave promised to be in here to put out the contrarian viewpoint. I guess he's hiding. Well, in any case, who disagrees with this?
Well, no, that...
Randall? Give me a talking stick. The talking stick is coming.
Do you want to back up one?
We're fine.
Okay, the part I heard was you sounding contrarian about the cloud. That's what I'm disagreeing with. And I think we have enough examples now with the internet era to know how it's going to go. So it's going to gobble up old industries and old ways of doing business and create new ways of doing business. Some people are going to hate it and some people are going to love it. It's here, it's a fact. Some places are going to be bandwidth constrained a little bit longer. Other places, that's not an issue, and they're already going gangbusters in it. Attitudes will have to change, or they'll get changed for them. A lot of people are waiting for certain individuals, some of them are in this room, to retire so that they can move ahead. I've probably said enough.
Can we get the mic in Mike's hands?
Randall, I don't know if that remark was aimed at me, but I have retired 4 times. So I don't know if I'm in the Luddite category or not, but I think there's a misconception of what the cloud is. There's people that think it's move your data center somewhere else, invisible, hidden in Virginia or something. But it's really not. I suppose you could use it that way, which is what John McElhaney did with Cloud Switch, which was exactly that intention. But the cloud has to be looked at as a platform. A platform just like, 32-bit Windows was a platform. It was a change. And you're right, Randall, that people who produce things designed for that will take advantage of what is a new platform. It's got little computers underneath, and there's this somewhere, and there's memory, but it's a platform change. And that with what you said, it creates opportunities, and there will be all the people who will say, well, it doesn't suit our business. And who was it mentioned about SolidWorks? Well, SolidWorks was another generation allowed by a platform change. And everything we've seen in this world is the underlying infrastructure changes, and we have to change. And so I guess I have to retire to have another change, but the point is that you're seeing products that were designed for that purpose, and people resisting it, and they say, oh, there's no security, there's this or that. If you work in a building and it's got USB slots in it, you have risk of the software, the design walking out of the door. You have less risk of that when your data's in the cloud, but we don't want to believe that. It's far more secure. But people won't believe that. The late adopters, whatever you call them, the laggards, will continue saying, we have to have it in our building. Well, we have our mail in Microsoft's Office 365. It's far better than when we had it on our own Exchange server. And we don't care that it's going somewhere because it's not. And so I think we have to look at this, and somebody talked about little pieces of software talking to each other. Do you know how much easier it is in the cloud just to send a textual thing called HTTP something to another web service to do things instead of the add-on things that we do in software that's installed in premises? Has anybody done an add-on for Pro-E? It's a nightmare. I was responsible for that mess as having to do it just in time because somebody wanted it, and it's lived for the next God knows how many years. I think I have a contrarian over here.
Actually, quite the opposite. I want to build on what you said a little bit. First of all, I'll say that I think it's the laggards that Randall was saying need to retire and get out of the way. No, because I don't think in this case you're a laggard.
In this case.
You picked up on that, I'm sorry. But, building on both what Randall said and you, Mike, a couple things. In 1996, what people who even knew that there was such a thing as the internet, because there weren't that many in 1996, if you go back and look. But the people who did know about it thought it was nothing more than basically a place to document information and maybe share that information with other people. I mean, we really only had static HTML at the time, with very few exceptions, I might note. And what the internet obviously turned into, look at it today, it's obviously something very, very different. It's a lot more than even, I think, what you, Brad, and what Randall and even Mike said. And so I see the cloud, which is obviously built as, kind of built up from the internet. I see the cloud having as big of an impact in the same, in this even shorter time frame than what the internet had, and as much of a paradigm shift from just being an static HTML-centric way of sharing information to becoming the hub through which we do everything today. And so if you believe that the internet effectively became its own organism, I would say the cloud will do exactly the same. It will become its own organism.
Just before we go on, just the last speakers in order: Steve Bodnar, Mike Payne, and Randall Newton. Please say who you are so that people can rush up to you afterwards. Okay? Okay, go ahead.
Jim.
Great. It's Jim Brown with Tech Clarity. I would agree with some of the things said, and I think one of the things that I would add to it, I do, by the way, think that the security on the cloud is an absolute myth. People that think they have security with what they have right now are fooling themselves in many cases.
Talk in your mic.
Is that how these things work? All right, I'll give it a try. Never used one of these fancy talking sticks before, but I'm going to give it a shot. Anyway, I do believe that a lot of the security issues on the cloud are a myth, and people are living in a false sense of security on the false sense of security on the security they already have. I think one of the things, looking at the cloud as a platform is not enough, because I think when you look at it, as Steve was saying, the changes that the internet brought about aren't just technical. I mean, the internet has changed the world. It's changed everything, and the cloud is doing that. And part of it is because we can now connect people real time on applications in social ways, and that's just something we absolutely couldn't do before. And so, I've never heard people not be able to hear me before. I get that from. Anyway. Hello. All right. Thank you. This is a directional microphone, evidently. All right, thank you. Anyway, I'll share one anecdote and then I'll sit down, and you didn't hear the rest of it, but it was great. I think it's funny. I was in two sessions that talked about the cloud and social computing over the last couple of days, one yesterday and one today. And yesterday we were there and we were talking about, will this happen and how will it happen? And it was interesting because the average age of the people in the room, we did a quick calculation, was about 107. But we were talking about how things might happen or way things might change. And then today, when we talked about it again, we had, and I forget her name, but she's the one that talked about the milling, Kate, and 20-something. And instead of talking about what might happen with design and engineering in a social setting, she said, oh, well, on our project, we have remote teams and we're far away from each other. And she's not waiting for tools to happen from anybody in this room. She's using Facebook. She's using Facebook group chat. And guess what? It's not very good at it in some cases because it doesn't actually capture the chat. So they have to copy and paste that and put it in a document. And then they're putting it in a Dropbox. And they're also using Skype. So here's the point. The culture of the people that are coming up now that are cloud natives are going to be pulling bits and pieces of capabilities from wherever they can find them to solve problems. And if that's us as an engineering community that brings it to them, that's great. If not, they're going to find ways to do things. And oftentimes they're going to find ways to do things that are not safe or secure, but they're going to get things done. And so I think the technical side is much less of an issue than the people side.
Thank you, Jim. One of the points one of the issues that you raised that I want to highlight is the appification and mashup that is being done. People will always take the tools that they have that they know, and if they can't find what they need, they will take what they've got, put them together in ways that are unexpected, exactly the way you've just described. We have Chris.
I don't remember what we thought in 1996 about what the internet was going to be. I must have thought something, but I don't remember. But I think that if you look at those 15 years of average, not just at the last 1 or 2 or 3 years, but if you look on average over those 15 years, the internet has been extraordinary in communication and it's been very poor in collaboration. And I think that what the cloud is going to bring is going to bring a revolution in collaboration. And what I always hear, and I've heard it several times now, is we're talking about security. When I hear people talk about the cloud, I hear them talk about security, which basically means they're talking about what they're afraid of. But I think that if we talk about what the cloud is going to enable, it's going to enable collaboration in a way that we've not seen and that we cannot even imagine today.
Evan Yates. When I talk to CAD users and listen to them about what they think about the cloud, the main thing that I hear is an issue of trust. They don't trust their vendors on the cloud. And I'd say trust is fairly important. In some cases, it's beyond the capacity of the vendors to be able to handle this. For example, has anybody up here put files on Mega Upload? You might have a hard time getting them now.
Explain that. It sounds like most people don't know what you mean.
Mega Upload was a very large cloud storage site that got taken down by the federal government for piracy.
Because people stored pirated content there, but there are also a lot of legitimate users who were using it for business collaboration with their own intellectual property, and they lost access to their stuff. Keep going.
But when I look at cloud vendors, my personal inclination is I would trust a new cloud vendor more than I would trust any one of the top 5 or 6 CAD vendors, because with those vendors I've had experiences where I've seen them do things like pulling products from the market, not supporting former versions of software. So I've seen some bad behavior on their parts that maybe not intentional, but after 20 or 30 years of watching it, it's hard for me to trust them.
Hey, so my name is Nitin Rais. So I'm a 20-something, and I run a cloud business. And I'll be the first to say that I don't think the cloud is the one thing that's the exciting change. Cloud is commodity, and there are tons of other industries that we can learn that from. What's exciting is not the technology piece. We come from MIT. We're excited about technology, but that's commodity. What's exciting is what it enables, and that is really a democratization of the process of democratization of where content comes from. It's not going to be, large organizations with thousands of employees. It's going to be people like Wendy from Stanford, building interesting content and now having a channel to get that idea out. For design, there's a person from Portland, Oregon, who came up with a better iPod case, and in 4 days raised $1.5 million of non-dilutive capital on Kickstarter for just directly from customers. The same thing is going to happen for tools. That's exciting. It's the delivery channel and not the technology, because that's commodity.
Mark?
My name's Mark Halpern. I'm with Gartner. I wanted to respond to Evan's comment. I understand the perspective from which you're making that comment. However, having worked with some of the vendors that tried to get into software as a service early, what we observed is that if you're a smaller vendor and you don't have a steady track record financially yet, and you have software as a service, or you're in the cloud or whatever, and manufacturers depending on you, but you become insolvent, that manufacturer that was dependent on you is totally screwed, as opposed to having the licenses in-house that if you have trained users, they can continue to use those indefinitely. So that's one caveat. Now, I do understand that in this industry, little fish eat big fish. But I just wanted to just make that point to balance out what you said, Evan.
Dan?
Personally, I believe the cloud is going to disintermediate most of the people in this room. Today, I can launch a server on Amazon for pennies an hour. I can get a couple 20-somethings who are really sharp building applications. Imagine your favorite CAD system in the cloud in 2 years. Bandwidth is growing. They can iterate rapidly, get their customers to test the product for them, while the legacy business are going through their waterfall product management. The cloud means that everybody can build a product. The cloud means that the resources are available, and the competition globally is going to get really, really, really tough. So the first people to the cloud, the first ones with real solutions, are the ones that are going to be in business 5 years from now, and they'll be sitting in the room. I think everybody else is going to be scratching their head saying, what did we do wrong? My opinion.
So I want to point out that we had several presentations from Meutic Parataxis yesterday, from Pinocchio, from Kaggle, that directly relate to this. Pinocchio is about building a cloud-based ecosystem for doing exactly that. Kaggle is a cloud-based, I believe Kaggle is based on Microsoft Windows Azure, because that's how we got introduced to them. But a cloud-based market for competitive analysis that you can just essentially turn the spigot on. One of the things that I've been thinking about, or what are my grandkids going to be doing for a job? I don't have grandkids yet. Zach, are you in the room? Let me know if I'm wrong. But one of the things that I'm thinking is just as traditional education is changing, spending $160,000 for a college education to be there in present where the technical resources are all available to you for free on the web, is getting to be a different choice. So the education system is in for a huge shock. But also, the idea of actually going and working for a single company will still be around when my grandkids are working. But I do believe that many people will be sitting at home, particularly the smarter ones, and going after these opportunities and jobbing out and finding out what is available and going after and solving problems. I think that that's going to be a much larger opportunity. Dan?
Thank you, Brad. Dan Raker. I think you posed the provocative question in such a way that people have the opportunity to say, yeah, I do have an idea of what's going to happen in my business. I don't think people have a clue of what the cloud is really going to do. And I challenge folks who've even answered, because even whether you call it a platform, whether you call it this or call it that, every example I've heard so far in the last 20 minutes has been, this is how it might help me with some existing problem in the format and the way that I think about it now. But what about the ways that you don't think about it now? So in the risk discussion, for example, if we had better data, well, what if data was just running continuously, so we had better data and the meter were running in the bottom of the screen and telling us our sustainability score, our risk score, or whatever. These are, that might be a leap that we're not necessarily thinking about now that the cloud enables. But I would challenge to another whole level completely. The whole risk discussion was also predicated, for example, on urgency. The cloud, in some ways, eliminates urgency. And so our entire, not just our business model or the immediate problem at hand, saying I might need more bandwidth or I might need something different or a different way of doing collaboration, and that might be available. It might change the underlying premise of why we're in business or what problems we're trying to solve. And I don't think we have a clue about those things right now.
Can you, before you give up the mic, can you clarify a little bit about the link between the cloud and lack of urgency?
Well, let me say it a different way. Their solutions that make money often solve a problem of reacting to a limited resource. The notion of the cloud is unlimiting the resource. Now, there'll always be constraints, but resources that we think are limited now are going to radically change in a cloud environment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Mike has the mic again?
Yeah, it happened that way, didn't it? Yeah. Well, what I don't agree with, I understand where Evan's coming from, and I don't totally agree with him. But one of the things that has plagued this industry, which I think I remember some D.H. Brown conference 20 years ago talking about interoperability, and I think has dragged 3D down in any way, shape, or form, is the total lack of openness. Interoperability, that you can't get this from here to there and you've got to buy everything from one vendor because it won't work and the rest of it. I think one of the opportunities that the cloud gives us and the people who are forward-looking and put their stuff on the cloud is that things can interoperate and you get the best in class, which has never happened in this industry. No, nobody agrees with me. Oh, all right.
Okay, I'd like to, I'll let Mike say a word, because he's got the mic. But then what I want to do is to take the last portion of this session to hear from the people who actually are users in the audience, and hear what they and their firms are thinking. And I think that we, you know, if we didn't have customers to deal with, life would be a lot easier. We'd be poor. But I think grounding the conversation in the vision of the customer's mind, I think, is really important. But first, Mike.
Mike Riddle, Evolution Computing. When I think about the cloud, what I think about is an environment. That literally, it's like, okay, we're going to go in the pool. We're going to swim there. We're going to live there. It's going to become the center of our lives. Just like when we say on the internet, we go to this site or we go to that site. And this means not just the endpoint services, but our own devices. We might start a problem on our desktop, head off to the airport working on a tablet, make a comment while we're waiting on our iPhone, move back with it all being a transparent and seamless process. When I look at what strikes me as interesting about what's happening today, the sort of services we talked about, people using Facebook, the one about the Munich Parataxis presentation, on a large number of people being brought to bear on data. What I see is that the collaboration space is going to be where it grows, where it really sort of takes over, but not in the traditional idea of collaboration, like design collaboration or something, but literally encouraging a large number of fairly real-time interactions between people. And that's what I think is going to be the equivalent of the killer app for the cloud, is that will become ubiquitous.
Mike? So let's start with Judy. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Judy Beach at Black & Veatch. No relation, but it's been a fun career. So when I think about our business and what it means to be a user and all this, I go back to the fact that we have, I don't know, 700 different applications that are being run on 10,000 desktops. And I cannot believe that my job has devolved into managing apps on desktops scattered globally. And so to me, one of the big powerful things of the cloud and virtualization is the idea that I can put a copy of an app out there that's been tested, and then 5,000 people can go get that app at their leisure, and I know that they're all getting the same copy of the app, and I don't have to worry about their DLLs. I don't have to worry about whether they've got a 32-bit OS or a 64-bit OS. I don't have to do all that stuff. So I think that while I agree that the app vendors are going to start designing apps for this new platform, I think it's also going to be true that delivering the apps that way is going to get rid of a lot of monkeying around that distracts us from what we want to actually use the apps for.
Okay. Let's go to Jim.
My name is Jim Balding from the Ant Group, and the cloud both excites me and scares the hell out of me. First, I think it's going to remove Murphy's Law. Or not Murphy's Law. What is it?
Moore's Law?
There we go. Get that on tape, will you? The computing speed and the computing power that are going to be in my hands are going to be phenomenal. And as a small firm, I can do the big things. Storage goes up, my computing power goes up. At the same time, crowdsourcing, my job as an architect, supply and demand, there's a large supply of lower cost designers throughout the world that might do a job for $500 that I might need to charge $5,000 for. So again, excited as hell, got to figure out how to make some money.
Okay. Darren?
Darren Young with Southland Industries. We're, I think, one of the top 5 mechanical design, build, maintain contractors in the U.S. I think just about everything everybody said about the cloud is true. Minus some of the security risks. You do run the risk of companies going out of business, but I think that the next generation isn't going to think of it the same way as some of us have. Show of hands, who's went to Best Buy and not bought a TV because they were worried the cable was going to go out? Anybody? You know, it's becoming a commodity. So, you know, some of the ways we're looking, you know, I think of the cloud in a very broad term. It's a lot of things to a lot of people. It's not, well, I'm right, you're wrong. We're all right and we're all wrong. Scalable resources. You know, we recently expanded our energy modeling group, spent nearly $100,000 on a bunch of computers. We got 5 people with like 30 computers. You know, we're spending a lot of money on that. Most of the time those computers aren't used, but there's times they run for, 3-4 days straight. Cloud computing is about 12 cents an hour. Right. You know, that processing power. Who doesn't see value in that? I don't, that's important to us. We also see it as being a more commodity. It allows us to more easily switch vendors. You know, Autodesk is one of our vendors. Even if we wanted to, it'd be pretty tough to switch to a competitive product. You know, but we look at a cloud solution as allowing that to happen a little bit more easily. We're unhappy with you, we're going to switch to somebody else. You know, looking at things like backup of our data storage. You know, just spent $4,000 on a backup system for a mainframe system. And every day we go down and pull out the tapes and put them in a blue box, and a truck comes and takes it away and brings back new ones. Why can't I just throw them out there? You know, and if you're not able to restore my data, or it looks like you're starting to become financially insolvent, I direct you to another service. Somebody else is going to do it for me, and a lot cheaper than I could do it myself. You know, those are some of the things I'm looking at. You know, same thing that Judy had mentioned, single point of administration. You know, my God, when I got to the company, there's one database in particular. I found 70 copies of it throughout the company. There's 4 now, because I managed that. I centralized it. Yes, it's not up in the cloud, but in my mind, virtualization, Citrix, all those things, they're all part of the cloud. They're aspects of the cloud. They're taking functionality of the cloud and extending them further. But I think it's going to be, hugely important. You know, do we know what it means? I don't know. Ask my kids when I'm dead. I mean, because really, somebody brought up John McCarthy earlier, the father of Lisp, artificial intelligence. 1961, he predicted cloud computing. When he talked about computing resources being like a utility. 50-some years later, maybe that's why he died, because, oh great, my vision's realized, I can go now, done. But some of these things take a long time, and we don't know what it's going to become. But I do think it's here. It's going to, what it becomes is anybody's guess.
Thank you. I want to point out something. Many of you heard the story about how I met Joseph Yunka, and I was at a augmented reality conference, and there was not a lot of stuff that was relevant, and I walked into this room, and there was this amazing thing that he was doing that was directly relevant. But in that same room, there was one other thing going on, and that was a gentleman from SAP. SAP, I've been trying to get here for quite some time. I just haven't gotten the attention of the right person. But there was a gentleman in there from SAP who was showing something related to augmented reality, but much more related to cloud. And the details of it are much less important than the message. And the message that they were giving out was the reason we are doing this investigation, the reason we are spending this large amount of money, and they've been doing it for 5 years now, on experimenting in these areas, is we believe to our core as a company that at some arbitrary point in the future, we are going to need to compete for our customers' attention on a daily basis. That somebody will be able to flick a switch and say, well, I don't like what SAP is doing today, I'll be using Oracle. And Oracle they'll get fed up with them and they'll go somewhere else, and then they'll come back to SAP. And that SAP believes that they will need to do enough to capture your attention that you stick with them. Now, I don't know whether that's actually going to come to fruition or not, and I think there are a lot more complexities there, but the point is that we're talking about radical potential change here, and I think that some of the points that you made point to that. Scott?
My name is Scott Brinks. I'm actually unrelated to this industry. I'm a logistician and a supply chain person by trade. I'm the president of a company called TransTrade. We're a logistics company owned by private equity. And at the moment, I'm withdrawing from the cloud. We went to the cloud believing that we could be scalable and real time. But as we find, as the reality of users of software, too much is promised, too soon, too little delivered. And it's really hard today for users to validate all the people that say they're in the cloud as to who they really are, how deep are they, do they really know what it means, is their application really available at the scale and scope it needs to be. So though everyone speaks cloud, it doesn't mean cloud. And it's really difficult for those of us that are users to figure that out sometimes. So I am now taking back in-house all that we sent out, because it hasn't worked. In fact, it's been a woeful disaster. And how many of us haven't had a software woeful disaster? We all have. We've all had them all our careers. And the problem, as we heard earlier about, I'm excited but I'm scared to death, is that this once again is becoming a repeat of the syndrome we've seen since the 80s into the internet and now into the cloud. And for those of us that want to be early adopters, you're making us laggards.
Okay, I want to hear from Scott Lehmans, and then we're going to go back to Alan, and then we're going to wrap.
Okay, once again, Scott Lehmans from Avitech Pacific. We do services, engineering services, we do technology development, we make software tools, or we assemble software into design environments for government and commercial clients. So kind of IP is our product, but what we do gets dictated by the customer. So are we on the cloud? We've probably dabbled with it on the technology side, but we're not there because the customer doesn't ask us to be there. There's no point in us being there. I can see some benefits for data storage. I'm getting tired of having to, clean things up, and then they buy more and more terabyte drives. On the other hand, we do a lot of ITAR work. We only hire U.S. citizens, and we do classified information.
For those that don't know, can you explain
Oh,
what
ITAR,
is?
it's basically, you have to ask me about the acronym. And I
Don't worry about the
it's basically, international trade restrictions on technology. So it's a way of classifying material, and then you get into your security claims like secret, top secret, et cetera. And we do all those things. So the good news about dealing with things secret and above is those environments are at least 2 generations behind technologically on every front. So I don't have to worry about the cloud for those. It's impossible. No internet, no cloud, so not a problem, which is also an issue we see. It was actually last year at my Utic Parataxis, and I had to poke Simon about this. I said, the reason I don't use the cloud is because last year's demonstration, when you showed me how great the cloud was, it didn't work, and so you had to go to your backup slides because the internet here didn't work. But it points out a problem. Internet goes down, you lose connectivity. Sometimes that can be an issue, so there's a stability thing. But I think probably the perception is reality. Some of you say there is no problem with security, and others say, oh, there's holes in security. Security is verification. It's the walking by and checking the lock. Until I got something that feeds back to me that I can verify something is secure, it probably won't get implemented by my customers, and therefore it won't get implemented by me. So perception is real in that case, and I think security means different things to different people. For us, it's very simple, especially in a classified environment, is a hard document in a locked safe, in a locked room, in a locked building can't be hacked remotely by the Chinese. So that's your competition at that level. As far as ITAR goes, which actually scares me more, because if someone beats me senseless and takes my ITAR information, I can still go to jail for it. Once again, I'm not willing to, it's true, you think that it's not that funny. But I dare you to try to take my ITAR, anyone. So I got a Marine Corps shirt underneath here. But those are the issues we're dealing with, and I think that's probably going to be the hurdles we'll have to address from an end user standpoint.
Okay, and last comment back to the vendor community.
This is my last comment on the cloud. Last year I had a hard decision to make. My servers were getting old, my SANs were getting old, everything in my whole data center needed a refurbish. $100,000, $200,000. So we jumped to the cloud. We spent all of last year rebuilding our entire infrastructure to the cloud. I now own two Cisco routers, some high-speed internet, avoided a couple $100,000 in capital, and my operating costs have been cut in half. So for a small business, it's working for me. Now, may I have to retract when I need to scale quickly or things are getting out of control? May I have to go to a hybrid model? Possibly. We're planning for that. But right now, the cloud has made a huge difference in my bottom line and my operating costs, and hey, it works.
Thank you.
All right. One of the things that was interesting about the discussions is that I didn't hear my perspective, so I'm going to throw that out and then I promise I will summarize. My perspective is that it will radically change the way that we all do what we do. Okay, whether we use it on the cloud or not, there are going to be new apps that are developed that are much more lightweight, much more agile, much faster, more flexible, so that what I do today, which is help Brad with a PowerPoint presentation using a honking huge Microsoft PowerPoint that is hard to navigate, and I'm taking on Microsoft, but it's just a big application and it's hard to navigate. Maybe next year there'll be some little tiny app that's an editing of a PowerPoint app. So I don't need the whole thing, I just have a little tiny thing that makes me faster and makes it easier for me to do the one thing I wanted to do. And today I'm doing PowerPoint, tomorrow I'll do it with some other application. So I really do think that software developers are going to have to change what they deliver in order to deliver it on a cloud. And whether it's used on a cloud or not, it's going to change all of the stuff that we all use every day. So that's my perspective on it. But what you all said was also very interesting, and I think Jim said it best. The cloud is both something that excites us and scares us all to death, because if you listen to the comments from the beginning to the end, it started out with, this is so cool, we're really going to be great. But then it turned into, it's going to gobble up businesses who are using old ways of doing business, and the only ones who are going to win are the ones that can adapt and change. People need to take advantage of the new platform or whatever you want to call it, and competition is only going to heighten. Then you add to that what Jim said, which is that 20-somethings are going to avoid using all of the things that are out there now anyway. They're going to make it up as they go along, and God help us, they're going to get their jobs done, but it's not going to be trackable or searchable or any of those other things that our enterprises are geared to expect. So the cloud is really going to change an awful lot of things. We may not call it the cloud, and who knows what our grandchildren will think of it, but it is definitely something that in 20 years may not be at all what we think of it as today.
Just so long as it's not called the Matrix.
So thank you.
So we've been doing this now for, as I said earlier, this is our 13th COFES. And when we started COFES, most of the conversations were about the technology, and most of that technology was focused on the productivity of the individual. We were talking about specific CAD systems. We were talking at that point in time about high-end CAD systems and mid-range CAD systems, and mostly we were talking about CAD. There wasn't a lot of other stuff here. But gradually the conversation evolved much more towards enterprise productivity and tools for the enterprise. But recently, in the last 5 or so years, we've had long discussions and themes on the economy, on innovation. Last year we talked a lot about complexity, and this year we have our focus on risk. But the bottom line here is the conversation at COFES has evolved much more towards a discussion around vision and strategy than the specifics of an individual application that we deal with on the day-to-day basis. And the whole goal for us here, and I hope for your goal as well, is to take a few days in the desert, step back, have conversations with your peers about the much bigger picture and the context for which you're doing your day-to-day work. And I hope you'll join us next year, April 14th, or April 11th through 14th. We're back here again. Your invitations will be in the mail in October. And right now, I invite you to join us for the reception in the tent. Thank you.